I was sent to inspect an underground dam. Something watches from the dark. Welcome to my channel, The Final Tale. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe, because tonight's story is one I barely survived. My name is Marcus Webb, and for the past 11 years, I've worked as a structural engineer specializing in hydraulic infrastructure. That's a fancy way of saying I inspect dams, reservoirs, and water control systems that most people never think about. The kind of places buried so deep beneath cities and mountains that they might as well not exist until something goes wrong. I've seen some strange things in my career. Flooded chambers where the water shouldn't be, cracks in concrete that form patterns too deliberate to be natural, equipment that stops working for no reason, then starts again the moment you leave. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I found beneath Coldwater Dam. It started 3 months ago, on a Tuesday morning in late October. I was sitting in my apartment in Portland, nursing my second cup of coffee and scrolling through work emails when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my supervisor's number, Gerald Pitts. 63 years old, 20 years past retirement, still working because he didn't know what else to do with himself. "Marcus," he said, his voice carrying that particular weight that meant this wasn't a social call. "I need you to take an assignment." Short notice, I know, but it's important. I pulled up my calendar. "When are we talking?" "Tomorrow. You'd be leaving tonight, actually. It's Coldwater Dam up in the Cascades." Ever heard of it? I hadn't, and that itself was unusual. I pride myself on knowing the major infrastructure in the Pacific Northwest. "What's the situation?" Gerald paused. The kind of pause that makes your stomach tighten. "Routine inspection. The facility's been experiencing some irregularities. Minor pressure fluctuations, strange readings on the monitoring equipment. Probably nothing, but the contract requires an on-site evaluation every 5 years, and we're overdue." "Why me?" "You've got 3 other engineers who could handle a routine inspection." Another pause, longer this time. "The last 2 people we sent refused to go back. One of them quit the company entirely. Said he'd rather work retail than set foot in that place again." I should have asked more questions. Should have pressed him on what exactly spooked 2 experienced engineers badly enough to walk away from good-paying jobs. But I didn't. Maybe it was professional pride. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe deep down, some part of me needed to prove I wasn't afraid of dark places. "Fine," I said. "Send me the details." The drive took 6 hours, winding through increasingly remote mountain roads until civilization became a memory. Coldwater Dam wasn't listed on any tourist maps. There were no scenic overlooks, no informational plaques, no parking areas for hikers. Just a single paved road that ended at a chain-link gate with faded government signage warning against trespassing. I arrived just before sunset, the October sky already dimming to bruised purple. The gate was unlocked, as Gerald had promised. I drove through and continued another mile down a service road cut into the mountainside. The forest pressed close on both sides, dense stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock that blocked out what little light remained. The dam itself didn't look like a dam, not from this angle. What I saw was a massive concrete structure built into the side of the mountain, like a bunker from some forgotten war. The entrance was a heavy steel door set into the concrete face, painted in peeling industrial green. A small parking area held a single vehicle, a beaten-up Ford pickup that must have belonged to the facility manager. I parked and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at that door. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees since I'd left Portland. My breath fogged the windshield. I grabbed my equipment bag and got out. The silence hit me immediately. No birds. No wind in the trees, just absolute suffocating quiet. Even my footsteps on the gravel seemed muted, absorbed by the weight of the surrounding forest. The steel door opened before I could knock. A man stood in the doorway, late 50s, weathered face, wearing a Carhartt jacket over a flannel shirt. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare you see in people who have spent too long in isolation. "You Webb," his voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "That's me. You must be the facility manager. Gerald said you'd be expecting me." He didn't introduce himself. Just nodded and stepped aside. "Rules," he said, pulling a laminated card from his pocket and holding it out. "Read them, follow them, no exceptions." I took the card. It was worn, handled so many times the plastic coating had started to peel. 7 rules, typed in faded text. 1. Do not enter any chamber after midnight. Return to the surface station before 11:45 p.m. 2. If you hear voices on the radio, do not respond, turn it off immediately. 3. Stay on marked paths, do not investigate unmarked passages. 4. If the emergency lights activate, proceed directly to the nearest exit. Do not stop. 5. Do not shine your light into the water. 6. If you see someone else in the facility, report to the surface immediately. You are alone. 7. Trust your instruments. Do not trust your senses. I read them twice. These are unusual safety protocols. The manager's expression didn't change. They're not suggestions. Every person who's ignored these rules has either quit or he stopped himself. Just follow them, or what? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my skin crawl. Fear, deep, primal fear. Or you'll understand why the last inspection was 5 years ago instead of 1. The facility manager, I never did get his name, gave me a brief. Orientation. Coldwater Dam was what's called a subsurface storage dam, built in the 1960s as part of a regional water management project. Instead of spanning a river above ground, it utilized a massive underground reservoir carved into the mountain itself. A series of concrete chambers, tunnels, and control systems distributed across 3 levels, extending more than 800 feet into the earth. "Power's reliable," he said, leading me down a metal staircase that descended into fluorescent-lit corridors. "But keep your flashlight charged anyway." Sometimes the circuits trip, sometimes he didn't answer. The upper level was mundane enough: offices, a break room, storage areas, everything covered in a fine layer of dust. We passed through a security door and entered the industrial section. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. Our breath turned to mist. The manager showed me to the monitoring station, a cramped room filled with outdated equipment that looked like it belonged in a 1970s NASA facility. Gauges, dials, paper chart recorders slowly marking out pressure readings. A closed-circuit television system displayed grainy black and white feeds from cameras positioned throughout the complex. "Radio's there," he said, pointing to a handset mounted on the wall. "Channel 3. I monitor it from the surface, check in every hour. What about cell service?" "None, too deep." "Radio only." He moved toward the door. "I'll be topside. My shift ends at 10. After that, you're on your own until morning." "Wait, you're leaving." "I don't stay past 10. "Nobody does." He paused in the doorway. "Remember the rules, Webb, especially the first one. Before midnight every night you get yourself back to the station and you stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone." "Why? What happens after midnight?" He looked at me with something like pity. "You'll hear things, you might see things. Doesn't matter what your brain tells you, it's not real and you don't investigate. Clear." I wanted to argue, to demand real answers. But something in his tone killed the questions before they could form. I just nodded. He left without another word. I spent the first evening getting oriented. The inspection would take 3 days, standard structural assessment, checking for cracks, measuring water pressure, testing the integrity of the concrete and steel reinforcement. Routine work if you ignored the oppressive atmosphere and cryptic warnings. The main chamber was enormous, a cathedral of concrete and shadow. The ceiling arched 40 feet overhead, supported by massive pillars that disappeared into darkness at the edges of my flashlight beam. Water flowed through a series of channels cut into the floor, controlled by heavy steel gates that could be raised or lowered to regulate pressure. The sound of moving water echoed strangely, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. I set up my equipment and began taking measurements. Everything seemed normal. Pressure readings within expected parameters. Concrete showed typical aging but no critical deterioration. I marked my findings in my tablet, working methodically. At 8 p.m. I checked in with the surface on the radio. The manager's voice crackled back, distorted by static. Status, all normal. Beginning detailed inspection of the primary support columns. Time check, I glanced at my watch, 8:03. Back to the station by 11:45. Set an alarm, copy that, the radio clicked off. I continued working, moving between chambers, documenting everything with photographs and detailed notes. The deeper I went, the colder it became. My breath hung in clouds. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic patterns that seemed almost deliberate. At 10:30 p.m. I was in a secondary tunnel measuring stress fractures in a support beam when I heard it. A sound, distant, echoing footsteps. I stopped, holding my breath, listening. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate, moving through the chambers somewhere ahead of me, getting closer. Rule 6 flickered through my mind. If you see someone else in the facility, report to the surface immediately. You are alone. I grabbed my radio. Surface, this is Webb. I'm hearing movement in the lower tunnels. Can you confirm I'm the only person down here? Static. Then the manager's voice, tense, confirmed, you're alone. Where are you? Section D, Tunnel 7. Get back to the station now. But I haven't. Now, Webb. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound, heavy, expectant. Like something was waiting just beyond the reach of my light. I packed my equipment with shaking hands and headed back toward the monitoring station. The tunnels seemed longer than I remembered. The shadows deeper. Every echo of my own footsteps sounded like someone following just out of sight. I reached the station at 11:20 p.m., locked the door, and stood there breathing hard, my heart pounding. The radio crackled. Webb, I'm here. I'm in the station. Stay there. Don't leave until morning. What the hell is down here? Long silence. Then, I don't know, nobody does, but it's been here longer than the dam. He didn't say anything else. I sat in that cramped room, surrounded by ancient equipment, watching the security monitors. The cameras showed empty corridors, still water, nothing moving, but I could feel it, a presence. Vast and patient, watching from somewhere the cameras couldn't see. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the monitoring station, drinking terrible instant coffee and watching the clock. Every creak of the structure made me flinch. Every distant drip of water sounded like footsteps. At 12:47 a.m., one of the security monitors flickered. Camera 8, positioned in the deepest section of the facility. The image distorted, showing what looked like movement in the water, something large just beneath the surface. Then the feed cut to static. At 1:15 a.m., the radio activated on its own. No one had keyed the transmit button, but it hissed to life anyway. Through the static, I heard something that might have been breathing, or wind, or water moving through confined spaces. Then, clear as day, Marcus, my name, spoken in a voice that sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. I stared at the radio, Rule 2 screaming in my head. If you hear voices on the radio, do not respond. Turn it off immediately. I reached for the power switch, but before I could turn it off, the voice spoke again. Marcus, we've been waiting. I shut it down, sat in the sudden silence, my hands trembling. The rest of the night crawled by in excruciating slowness. I kept my eyes on the monitors, watching for any movement, any sign of what had called my name, but the cameras showed nothing. Just empty corridors and still water. At 6 a.m., gray light began filtering down through the ventilation shafts. The pressure in my chest eased slightly. I unlocked the door and stepped out into the corridor. Everything looked the same as it had the night before. Cold concrete, dripping water. The sound of the underground reservoir flowing through its channels, but something felt different, wrong, like the facility itself had shifted somehow during the night. The manager arrived at 7 a.m. I heard his footsteps descending the stairwell long before I saw him. When he appeared, he looked at me with those same tired, knowing eyes. You heard it, he said, not a question. On the radio, after midnight, it knew my name. He nodded slowly. It knows everyone's name, that's why we follow the rules. What is it? He poured himself coffee from the ancient pot in the corner. You want the official answer. There's a natural cave system beneath this facility. Sometimes gases build up, cause auditory hallucinations. Electromagnetic interference affects the equipment. Perfectly rational explanations. And the unofficial answer, he took a long sip of coffee. This mountain was here long before humans. The indigenous people who lived in these valleys, they had a word for this place, translates roughly to where the water speaks. They wouldn't come within 5 miles of this canyon. Said something lived in the deep places, something old. That's not an answer, it's the only answer I have. He set down his cup. Look, Webb, I've been managing this facility for 8 years. In that time, I've seen things I can't explain. Equipment that fails for no reason. Sounds that don't make physical sense. Shadows that move against the light. But here's what I've learned. If you follow the rules, you survive the inspection and you go home. If I don't, what? Then you either quit and never talk about it, or you end up like Eddie Marsh, engineer who did the inspection 7 years ago, ignored the rules. Thought he could figure it out, document it, prove something supernatural was happening down here. The manager's jaw tightened. He lasted 2 days. On the 3rd night, he radioed up screaming about something in the water, something that had been watching him. Something that was coming for him. What happened to him? We found him on level 3, curled up in a corner, unresponsive, eyes open, staring at nothing. He spent 6 months in psychiatric care. Still can't speak about what he saw without having panic attacks. I felt cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. And you just work here despite all this. Someone has to. The water doesn't stop flowing. The dam doesn't stop being critical infrastructure. So I follow the rules, I do my job, and I don't ask questions I don't want answered. He moved toward the door. You've got 2 more days, Webb. Get your inspection done and get out. That's my advice. I spent day 2 working with methodical determination. I told myself it was all explainable. Psychological pressure from isolation, infrasound from the water creating feelings of unease, the power of suggestion after being given a list of ominous rules. But the deeper I went into the facility, the harder that rationalization became. In the afternoon, I was in a section called the overflow chamber, a massive space where excess water could be diverted during heavy rainfall. The chamber was only partially filled, leaving a black expanse of water that stretched into darkness beyond my light's reach. I was measuring structural deflection in one of the support pillars when I noticed something on the concrete wall. Scratches, deep gouges in the surface, running in parallel lines, 4 lines. Like claw marks, except the concrete was 12 inches thick, reinforced with steel. Nothing should have been able to score it this deeply. I photographed them, trying to maintain professional detachment, probably just damage from old equipment or deliberate vandalism from previous workers. But the scratches were 30 feet above the water level, and there was no scaffolding, no way anyone could have reached that height without serious equipment. I moved my light along the wall and found more marks, dozens of them, hundreds, covering the walls in chaotic patterns that hurt to look at, like they violated some basic rule of geometry. My radio crackled. Web status check. I pulled the handset from my belt. In the overflow chamber, I'm finding some unusual structural damage. Might need to recommend additional analysis. What kind of damage? Scoring on the concrete, deep, extensive. I can't determine the cause. Silence. Then don't investigate it. Mark it in your report and move on. But if there's something compromising the structural integrity, Webb, his voice was sharp, listen to me carefully. That chamber has looked exactly the same for 40 years. The scratches don't get deeper, they don't spread. Whatever made them is done, leave it alone. I stared at the marks. In the beam of my flashlight, they almost seemed to move, to writhe. Understood. I left the overflow chamber and spent the rest of the afternoon in the upper levels, checking valves and pressure systems. Mundane work, safe work. But I couldn't stop thinking about those scratches, about what could have made them. At 6 p.m. I was back in the monitoring station, reviewing my notes and preparing for another night. The manager had left at his usual time, reminding me once again about the rules. I made dinner from an MRE, some kind of pasta that tasted like cardboard, and settled in to wait. Outside the reinforced door, the facility hummed and dripped and echoed with sounds that were probably water, but sometimes didn't quite sound like water. At 9 p.m., I did my hourly check-in. Everything normal. At 10 p.m. the same. The manager's voice sounded strained, like he was forcing himself to stay professional. 3 more hours, Webb. Then you lock that door and you don't open it until morning. Clear, clear. I mean it. You might hear things, might see things on the monitors, doesn't matter. You stay put. What kind of things? But he'd already cut the connection. I tried to focus on my work, reviewing structural data and organizing my findings. But my attention kept drifting to the security monitors. The grainy black and white feeds showed the same empty corridors, the same still water, except, was that movement on camera 12? I leaned closer. The feed showed a tunnel on level 2, one of the service passages I'd walked through earlier. For a moment I thought I saw something shift in the shadows. But when I blinked, there was nothing. I checked my watch, 10:47 p.m. My alarm was set for 11:40 p.m., enough time to pack up any equipment and get back to the station with 5 minutes to spare. I decided to do one more quick check of the primary chamber, just to confirm some pressure readings. I grabbed my equipment bag and headed out. The facility felt different at night. I'd noticed it the previous evening, but now it was unmistakable. The echoes sounded wrong, the shadows seemed thicker. And there was a smell, faint but pervasive, like standing water and old metal. I made my way down to the primary chamber, my footsteps echoing off concrete walls. The main reservoir stretched out before me, a dark mirror reflecting the industrial lights. I set up my pressure gauge and began taking readings. Everything was normal, exactly as it should be. I was packing up my equipment when I heard it again. Footsteps, but not like before. These were closer, deliberate, coming from the tunnel behind me. I spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing, the footsteps stopped. Hello, my voice echoed back to me, distorted. Manager, is that you? No response. I checked my watch. 11:15 p.m., still had time to get back. The footsteps resumed, closer now, moving with purpose. I grabbed my equipment and headed for the exit, walking fast but not quite running. The footsteps matched my pace. When I sped up, they sped up. When I slowed, they slowed. I reached the stairwell and started climbing. The footsteps followed. I could hear them clearly now, heavy boots on metal stairs, exactly one flight below me. I climbed faster. My breath came in gasps. The equipment bag banged against my side. Second level. The footsteps were still behind me, maintaining the same distance. Never gaining, never falling back. At the first level, I burst through the security door and sprinted down the corridor to the monitoring station. I slammed the door behind me and locked it, hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to turn the deadbolt. I stood there, breathing hard, listening. Silence. Then soft and clear just outside the door, a single footstep. I backed away from the door, eyes fixed on the handle. It didn't move, nothing tried to get in. But I could feel something on the other side, waiting, patient. My watch read 11:38 p.m., 2 minutes to spare. At midnight exactly, the lights went out. Not the emergency lighting that stayed on, casting everything in dim red, but every fluorescent fixture in the facility died simultaneously. I could see it on the security monitors. One moment normal lighting, the next the entire complex was bathed in crimson. Rule 4 echoed in my head. If the emergency lights activate, proceed directly to the nearest exit. But I was already at the station. The nearest exit was the surface entrance, accessible through corridors I'd have to cross in that red-lit darkness. I stared at the monitors. Camera 8, the one in the deepest section, showed movement again. Something large, circling just beneath the water's surface. The other cameras showed empty corridors, except camera 4. I leaned closer. Camera 4 showed the primary chamber, where I'd been taking readings less than an hour ago. In the red emergency lighting, I could see a figure standing at the water's edge. A person standing perfectly still, facing the camera. My blood turned to ice. Rule 6, if you see someone else in the facility, you are alone. I watched the figure, it didn't move. Just stood there, a dark silhouette against the darker water. Then slowly it raised one arm, pointing at the camera, pointing at me. The radio activated. That same voice from the previous night, but clearer now, more present. Marcus, come to the water. I didn't touch the radio, didn't move. Just watched the monitor as the figure began to walk. Moving through the chamber with slow, measured steps, heading toward the stairwell, heading toward me. Marcus, we've been waiting so long, come to the water. The voice was almost gentle. Almost kind. It reminded me of my father years ago, calling me in for dinner when I'd stayed out too late playing in the woods behind our house. Come home, Marcus. Something in my chest ached. A longing I couldn't name. Part of me, a small, irrational part, wanted to unlock the door. Wanted to walk down those corridors, down to the water, down to whatever was waiting for me in the dark. I turned off the monitor, sat in the red-lit room with my hands over my ears, fighting the urge to listen to that voice, fighting the urge to open the door. The night stretched on, eternal. Suffocating at 3:17 a.m., something scratched at the door, long, slow drags of something hard against metal. The sound went on for 20 minutes. At 4:33 a.m., water began seeping under the door. Not a lot, just a thin trickle that spread across the floor in patterns that looked almost like writing. At 5:12 a.m., the emergency lights went out. I sat in absolute darkness, breathing slowly, counting my heartbeats, telling myself this would end. Morning would come. It always came. In the darkness, I heard breathing that wasn't mine. At 6:47 a.m., the regular lights flickered back on. I opened my eyes. I hadn't realized I'd closed them, and found the monitoring station exactly as it had been. No water on the floor, no scratches on the door. The security monitors showed empty corridors in normal lighting. I unlocked the door with shaking hands and stepped out. Everything looked normal. But I knew with absolute certainty that something had changed, something fundamental. The facility was aware of me now, really aware, and it was done being patient. The manager arrived at his usual time, took one look at me and shook his head. "You look like hell. It tried to get me to open the door, but you didn't. No, then you're fine." He poured coffee like it was just another morning. "One more night, Webb. Finish your inspection and get out." I could leave now, come back another time, finish the inspection in daylight only. He gave me a pitying look. "You think it only moves at night? You think you're safer in daylight?" He took a sip of coffee. "You're committed now, it knows you. If you leave without finishing, you'll never be able to come back. You'll never be able to work underground again. Every tunnel, every basement, every parking garage, you'll feel it watching, waiting. That's insane, is it? Then explain why the last engineer who quit can't even ride an elevator anymore without having panic attacks. Explain why she moved to Kansas, the flattest, most open state she could find, and still wakes up screaming about being trapped underground. I had no answer to that. Finish the job, Webb. Follow the rules, get through one more night. Then you can go home and forget this place exists. I spent the final day in a haze of exhaustion and dread. My inspection was thorough but mechanical. I photographed structural elements, recorded measurements, documented everything with professional precision while my mind screamed at me to run. The facility seemed different in daylight, more normal, almost mundane. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold depth it shouldn't have. Every echo sounded slightly off. In the early afternoon, I was in the lowest section, level 3, checking the integrity of the foundation supports. This deep, the weight of the mountain pressed down like a physical force. The air was thick, hard to breathe. I found another set of scratches on the wall, fresh ones. The concrete dust was still white, not yet darkened by moisture. They formed words, MARCUS, tonight. I stared at them for a long time, then I took a photograph and moved on. Rule 7 whispered in my mind, trust your instruments, do not trust your senses. My instruments said the facility was structurally sound. My senses said I was standing in the throat of something vast and hungry. At 6 p.m., I completed my final measurements. The inspection was done. Technically, I could leave. Pack up, head to the surface, drive away. But I knew the way you know things in nightmares that wouldn't work. The manager was right. I was committed now. One more night, I radioed up. Inspection complete. All readings normal. Copy that. Good work, Webb. Just get through tonight and you're done. And then what? I just forget about this. That's what everyone does. That's how this works. We do our jobs, we maintain the infrastructure, we don't ask questions we can't answer. His voice softened slightly. You'll be okay. Just follow the rules one more time. I made it back to the monitoring station by 9 p.m., earlier than necessary, but I wasn't taking any chances. I locked the door, set up my equipment, and settled in to wait. The facility hummed around me, water flowing, metal expanding and contracting, sounds that could be anything. At 10:47 p.m., camera 8 went dark. At 11:15 p.m., camera 4 showed the figure again. Same place as before, standing at the water's edge in the primary chamber. But this time it wasn't alone. There were dozens of them, figures standing in perfect stillness, arranged in a circle around the reservoir, all of them facing the center, all of them perfectly identical. My hands went numb. At 11:43 p.m., they all turned at once, every figure moving in perfect synchronization, all of them facing the camera, all of them pointing. The radio crackled, not one voice this time, many voices. Overlapping, echoing, Marcus, last chance, come to the water. Come home, we've been waiting, so long, so patient. Come home, Marcus. I turned off the monitors, turned off the radio. Sat in silence with my eyes closed and my hands pressed over my ears, but I could still hear them. The voices weren't coming from the radio. They were coming from everywhere, from the walls. From the water in the pipes, from the air itself. Marcus. A scratching sound at the door, not like before. This was frantic, desperate, like a dozen hands clawing at the metal simultaneously. The lights began to flicker. Marcus, please. The voice was my father's. I hadn't heard it in 6 years, not since the funeral, but it was unmistakably him. Son, I need you. Come help me. Tears streamed down my face. You're not real. I'm trapped, Marcus, trapped down here in the dark. You have to let me out. You're not real. The door shuddered in its frame. Something was hitting it hard. Water began pouring under the door, not seeping this time, flooding. It spread across the floor, rising rapidly, and in the water I could see shapes, hands, faces. Bodies pressed against some invisible barrier, trying to push through. The emergency lights activated. Everything went red. In the crimson darkness, I heard my mother's voice. She'd been gone since I was 12, cancer taking her slowly and painfully. Baby, I'm cold. Let me in. Let me get warm. I pressed myself into the corner, knees drawn up, hands over my ears, eyes squeezed shut. Not real, not real, not real. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in great white clouds. Ice began forming on the walls. Every voice I'd ever loved, every person I'd ever lost, called to me through that door. My grandmother. My college roommate who died in a car accident. My first girlfriend, my childhood dog, all of them begging, pleading, crying. Marcus, please, it's so dark down here, so cold, let us in. Let us get warm, let us come home. The door buckled, metal shrieking, the dead bolt beginning to give way. I looked at my watch. 11:57 p.m., 3 minutes. The voices rose to a crescendo. The water was waist deep now, freezing cold, and I could feel hands grabbing at my legs, pulling, trying to drag me under. 2 minutes. The door exploded inward. I pressed against the wall, eyes open now because it didn't matter anymore, because whatever was coming and I would face it. The doorway was full of water. A wall of black water standing vertically, defying gravity, and in the water I could see them. Hundreds of faces, thousands, pressed against the surface like children against aquarium glass. All of them staring at me, all of them reaching. 1 minute, the water began to pour into the room, not flowing, reaching. Extending like arms, like tentacles, stretching toward me with terrible purpose. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only watch as it came for me. 30 seconds, the water touched my foot. Freezing, wrong, not water at all, but something pretending to be water. Something that had been pretending for so long it had almost forgotten what it really was. The faces in the water smiled. 15 seconds, I closed my eyes and thought of sunlight, of open sky. Of anything except the crushing weight of the mountain and the dark and the water that wanted to pull me down and down and down forever. 10 seconds. The cold wrapped around my ankle, tightened. Began to pull. 5 seconds. I screamed, not words, just pure animal terror. 0. Midnight. The water vanished all at once, between one heartbeat and the next. Gone. I collapsed on the dry floor, gasping, shaking, my throat raw from screaming. The door stood open, undamaged. The corridor beyond was dark but empty. I dragged myself to the doorway and looked out. The facility was silent, still. The emergency lights had turned off, replaced by normal fluorescent lighting. On the floor of the corridor, written in condensation, "Tomorrow. I made it through the night, I don't remember how. Shock maybe." Or my mind simply refusing to process what had happened. I sat in the monitoring station, staring at nothing, until gray light began filtering down from above. The manager arrived at 7 a.m. and found me still sitting there. He took one look at me and nodded slowly. "You survived. It tried to take me, but it didn't. You followed the rules." He helped me to my feet. "Come on, let's get you topside." We climbed the stairs in silence. With each step, the weight on my chest grew lighter. The air grew warmer. The sounds became normal again. We emerged into cold October morning. The forest was alive with birdsong. The sky was gray but bright, normal, real. I stood there breathing real air, feeling real sunlight on my face, and almost cried with relief. "Your inspection report," the manager said, handing me my tablet. "Everything structurally sound." I looked at him, at his tired eyes and weathered face, at the weight he carried. "Yes," I said, "everything's fine, no critical issues. Normal maintenance recommended." He nodded. "Good, that's what I'll tell them." He paused. "You won't come back?" "No, can't say I blame you." He looked back at the concrete entrance. "Someone will, though, someone always does, and it'll be waiting." I drove away without looking back. 6 hours through the mountains, back to Portland, back to civilization. But even as the miles passed, I could feel it. A coldness in my chest, a weight in my thoughts. The manager was wrong. I didn't forget. You can't forget something like that. That was 3 months ago. I finished the report, submitted it, collected my payment, told Gerald I was taking some time off. He asked if I wanted to talk about Coldwater Dam. I said no. He didn't push. For a while I tried to go back to normal, but normal didn't exist anymore. Every basement felt too deep. Every shadow seemed too dark. Every sound of dripping water made my skin crawl. I started having dreams. In them I'm back in the facility, back in the monitoring station. But the rules are different. Changed, and I can't remember what they are. I try to follow them, but I keep making mistakes. And each time I do, the water rises a little higher. 2 weeks ago, I woke up to find my apartment floor covered in water, just a thin layer, barely an inch deep, but it was cold, too cold, and when I looked down, I could see faces in it. They were smiling. Yesterday, I found condensation on my bathroom mirror, written in perfect block letters, "Soon." I called the facility manager. After 12 rings, he answered. His voice was rough, exhausted. "Webb, it's following me. It's in my apartment, in my dreams. I can feel it watching me." Long silence. Then, "You broke a rule, didn't you, during that last night? You did something you weren't supposed to do." I tried to remember through the fog of terror and exhaustion. I opened my eyes when it was coming for me. I opened my eyes and looked at it. Really looked. He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Rule 7, Webb, trust your instruments. Do not trust your senses. You were never supposed to see it, really see it. And now it's seen you too. What do? I don't know. Nobody's ever had this happen before. Everyone who broke the rules either quit and got lucky, or they ended up like Eddie Marsh." Another long pause. "Maybe you could try going back, facing it. Making peace with it somehow." Are you insane? Probably. This job does that to you. His voice softened. I'm sorry, Webb, I really am, but I warned you. Everyone warned you. Follow the rules. That's all you had to do. He hung up. I'm sitting in my apartment now, writing this. It's 11:47 p.m. The lights keep flickering. The temperature keeps dropping. I can hear water running somewhere, but all my faucets are off. On my computer screen, reflected in the dark window behind it, I can see a figure standing in my living room. It's been there for 3 hours now, just standing, watching, waiting. I haven't turned around. I'm afraid if I look at it directly, it'll be over. Whatever thin barrier still exists between me and it will break. My phone just buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It reads, "Come home. I don't know what to do. I can't run from this. Can't hide. It's in my walls, in my water, in my reflection. It's been patient for so long. Waiting in the dark beneath the mountain, and now it's here. Maybe the manager was right. Maybe I need to go back, face it, end this one way or another. Or maybe that's what it wants me to think. Maybe that's how it wins." The figure in my living room just moved, took a step toward me. The lights are flickering faster now. The water is rising. I can hear it calling my name. If you're listening to this, if you ever get sent to inspect Coldwater Dam, please, please, follow the rules. Don't do what I did. Don't look at it. Don't let it see you. Because once it does, once it really sees you, you become part of it. Part of the dark, part of the water, part of whatever ancient thing lives in the deep places beneath the earth. And it never lets you go, never. The figure is right behind me now. I can feel its breath on my neck, cold, wet, smelling of standing water and old concrete. It's whispering something, over and over. "Come home, Marcus, come home, come home." I think I'm going to turn around now. I think I need to see it, really see it. One last time, I think.